On behalf of the Call Scotland team, I'd like you to welcome today to today's webinar on SQA technology and assessment arrangements. We have 90 people signing up for this webinar, which clearly indicates to us that there's a lot of people in the same situation trying to support their learners with additional support needs to ensure the right technology is in place for them and to ensure that assessment arrangements are based on the normal way of working. So thanks very much for turning up today, and I hope this session will help to keep momentum going, to highlight the importance of digital technologies for learners with additional support needs in examinations, and that a future qualification body has accessibility at the heart of any new exam system. So today we have Paul Nisbet from Call Scotland, who will be leading the conversation. And we also have Annette Fulser, who has worked in the area of assessment arrangements and reasonable adjustments in the SQA for 15 years now. I was going to say 25 years. 15 years now. So welcome to both of you. There will be opportunities for you to ask questions, either via the chat panel or when we have a pause and you can put your mic on. And we really do encourage you to give us your views and thoughts as we're all working together to find good solutions. And the session will be recorded. I know that some people are already on their October break, so they will have the opportunity to watch it at a later date. And you'll also be sent it as well, so you can perhaps share it with colleagues as well. So we've a lot to cover in the next hour. The four main topics that are going to be up for discussion. We're going to start with the 2022 assessment arrangements, and Paul's going to give a quick overview of the current situation. On internet policy, we have some new and exciting news on this, which hopefully should, maybe, fingers crossed, make things a bit easier. Online dictation, we're going to look at what are the options for learners to use speech recognition to reduce the need for human scribes, and are these options available on a day-to-day basis? And lastly, what do we collectively need to do to support the use of technology for assessment arrangements this session? So these are the four main things that we're going to cover in this fairly short session today. So before I pass over to Paul, just a reminder to put your questions in the chat pane as we go along, and I'll collate them for Paul and Annette to answer. Thank you. Okay, Paul, I'll pass over to you. I think you're still on mute. Not hearing you yet, Paul.
The wrong microphone got selected. How about that? Is that any better?
That's you. Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just kick off with a reminder of where we're at. Before we invite Annette to share the exciting news with us. So I hope that people can see a slide on screen. Can you? Can somebody indicate yes or no?
Yes. That's good, Paul.
Jolly good. Okay. So yes, Shirley said 4 items to think about today. The first one is just thinking about the assessment arrangements in the academic year just passed, and then a bit of news on the SQA policy and assessment on the use of internet in assessment arrangements, and that's linked to the use of online dictation and speech to text tools. And then as we go throughout the session, we will be thinking about what actions we all need to take to support better use of technology as assessment arrangements in this coming academic year. We do have a form that if you can be filling in, we'd be grateful. And this is just to gather more background information, which will be fed back and shared with SQA as part of the work that we're doing. And I hope that Shirley might pop yes, she has, she's popped the link into the chat pane. So a wee reminder, of course, these are the access to assessment principles that SQA run under, and everybody else as well. So their arrangements are intended to enable candidates to demonstrate their attainment, but not to compensate for lack of attainment. They must not compromise the integrity of the qualification. They must be tailored to meet the candidate's individual needs, and they should reflect as far as possible the candidate's normal way of working and of learning and producing work. So SQA have published the figures for the use of or requests for assessment arrangements for 2022 on their website, and the links are up there on the screen, and I think Shirley might pop it into the chat as well. So what we can see is that between 2019 pre-COVID and 2022, there's a 27.5% increase in the number of candidates, and then a 30% increase in the number of requests. So that's quite a significant increase, and it'd be quite interesting to know, or for us to share the reasons why you think that's happened. Now, there was a study focused on GCSEs in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and this is in January of this year, and it asked people in England to report on the use of access arrangements, and what they also found was that an approximate level of increase in the referrals for assessment arrangements was about 30%. So I suppose what that says is that the pattern that we've seen in Scotland in the last term is mirrored by what we see across the rest of the UK. So this is what SQA say that people asked for in 2022. This is the number of requests for these different types of support. And I've highlighted the ones that are relevant to technology. So we can see we've got ICT with word processor with a spell checker, 15,000, a digital question paper, 9,000, ICT without a spell checker, 8,400. Coloured paper I thought was interesting because there was a big increase in the requests for coloured paper. And then readers and scribes and all the other types of arrangements and different modified papers that you can get or that you can request. Now, one of the things that has always interested me, as you know, is the balance of technology compared to human support. And so about 30% of all assessment arrangement requests included technology in some form or other. And that's interesting because that's obviously, you know, I think where we want to be. And the increase in the use of technology or requests to use technologies is greater proportionately than increase in requests for readers. And you might notice that requests for a human scribe have actually fallen compared to 2019 and 2018, which I thought was quite interesting. And if you've got any views on why that would be, it would be interesting to find them out in the chat pane. So this is the overall picture from 2008, when the digital papers were first introduced, 10 years to 2018. This graph stops at 2018 because SQA changed the way they report on the figures from 2018 onwards. But you can see there's a general increase in the use of digital question papers, which has obviously been continued and possibly even accelerated in 2019 and 2022. So that's just really to give you a bit of a background. And thinking a bit more, you know, so where are we now? Well, as you know, we've got question and answer digital question papers. These are PDF files, and they've got answer boxes so candidates can type their answers in, and you can use text to speech to read the questions, and you can physically access the papers. If a student might have a difficulty, you can zoom in. So that's where we are with them. And about 50% of the SQA papers are question only, so you don't have answer boxes, and that means that you would be using a digital answer book or a word processor on your device. Now, since over the past 3 years, there's been a number of events that have changed the picture. Obviously, the biggest is COVID, but other things that have been happening at the same time are some local authorities have been providing one-to-one devices to all their learners in the senior phase, in fact, primary 6 and above. And so some local authorities have been providing iPads to all students. Others have been providing Chromebooks to all students. And of course, the Scottish Government have pledged that by the end of this Parliament in 2026, all learners in Scotland will have their own personal device. So that's clearly changing the technological landscape, because technology will be more and more the normal way of working for all learners, but also learners with additional support needs. The other thing that's happened is that the accessibility tools that are built into all these devices that we're providing out to all learners have got much, much better. So, and particularly the online speech to text, the dictation tools, and that's why we're talking about this in this particular session. But also just general accessibility is much, much better than it used to be on all your three major platforms, Windows, iPad and Chromebooks. And things like Immersive Reader have really become extremely helpful for learners with additional support needs over lockdown. So we have a situation where COVID's driven the acceleration, I suppose, of digital learning in general. We're on track for providing personal devices to every learner in the country. That's going to have implications for what happens. And those devices that we're providing are much more accessible and have got much better accessibility tools built in. So it's quite a different situation from when we started with digital question papers in 2008. So with that in mind, as you know, we work with SQA, and so I'll just draw your attention to a few reports. So the first one was published in October last year, and that's assessment arrangements and assistive technology following COVID-19. An earlier one looking at Chromebooks, and then another paper looking at specifically at digital question papers for learners with blindness or significant sight loss. So if you're interested in following up any of those particular things, take a look at that. Now, following the report a year ago, SQA asked us to take a look at, to try and carry out some research, and there were two objectives to this. The first was to support the development of a new SQA policy on internet access in examinations and assessments. And the second one was to gather specific information about which devices were intended to be used for assessment in 2022. Now, this is relevant because SQA's security requirements are that, up until now, are that you cannot use the internet during an assessment. But what we found over the past few years, well, actually, I'll just tell you what we did. So I spoke to quite a lot of teachers and colleagues, just on Teams or on the phone. We did a bit of desk research, trying to find out what different local authorities, all 32, are actually doing when it comes to one-to-one devices. Are they providing Chromebooks or iPads or Windows or whatever? We had a few online surveys, and we had some online conversations 6 months ago in March. And so today really is to kind of carry on and try and keep that momentum going, because there was quite a lot of issues that were picked up. So the two questions around internet, first of all, for organising the examinations. This is a good quote from one of the teachers that we spoke to back in February. So I've been working with a group of S1 pupils, teaching them to use Chromebook text-to-speech and dictation. So Chromebook reading to you and you speaking to the Chromebook. Our pupils are capable but struggle to get ideas from their head onto paper. And this is obviously probably the most common additional support need that is behind requests for assessment arrangements. Yesterday I was down in Dumfries and Galloway. I was seeing a couple of learners, one in primary 6 and one in primary 7. And both of them are dyslexic, frankly. Both of them have significant challenges with reading. Both of them are very clever academically and very able academically, and both of them we've been introducing them to the online dictation tools as a way for them to express themselves and demonstrate their knowledge and skills. So this is just there's a lot of learners we know in this situation. So this teacher says that the use of the assistive technology on the Chromebooks, that's the built-in stuff, has vastly improved the confidence and quality of writing. And we're now thinking of how we can use this these supports for assessments and exams. But the teacher's saying that Chromebooks don't really work too well because they can't function offline. That's not quite true. But it certainly is much more difficult to use Chromebooks if you're not connected to the internet. So that's one side of it, internet and organising our technology for exams. And it's particularly relevant, I think, for Chromebooks and for iPads. And then the second aspect of the internet is for accessibility support. And so here's a different teacher saying, we have a pupil wishing to use speech to text on Office 365 for our English exam, which is our usual way of working. I know that speech to text is allowed under SQA rules, but is it possible to use Office 365? Well, the answer to that in January was no, because the Dictate tool in Office 365 works over the internet. And so if you can't use the internet, you can't use it. And so that's our first topic. And so really at this point, I will stop and I will hand over to Annette to bring us up to date with that.
I'm a wee bit concerned, Paul. The last time we spoke, we are having a meeting very soon, aren't we, to discuss how to take this work forward. We are not opposed to any of these accessibility tools, as long as we have a way of ensuring the integrity of the exam or the paper or however the young person is doing their assessment. So what we are hoping to do is to fund some sort of investigation into restricted access. So that's what we were hoping to go with. As far as using intranet and cloud-based to distribute DQPs and printers and all that, then that's absolutely fine, as far as I'm aware. But we don't know yet if there's a way that we can, well, okay, I should maybe say that we as an SQA doesn't know yet what that would look like, this idea of restricting access to just the accessibility tools, to make sure that we're, because we do not have that technical expertise. So we're hoping very much to work with Paul and Col about trying to find a way where there is some kind of high level solution. I'm not sure there is. It might be very, from what I understand from discussions with Paul, things are it's a complex landscape. It's, I can't keep all of that in my head. This does that, but that does that. So we wouldn't want for the guidance to be so technical and so onerous to schools that it would put you off. So, is that what you were expecting me to say, Paul?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, thank goodness! I thought I was missing something.
No. I mean, I think one of the things that was preventing people making progress was that they were working under the assumption that it just wasn't going to be possible. And so in my mind, first of all, we would like we would like the policy to be changed to permit it in principle, but obviously provided, only provided that the assessment can be made secure.
Absolutely.
And so the next question that we are faced with is, okay, right, how should we do this?
How should we do it? How do we go about it? And I think there's two things. There's the thing I said previously about not narrowing it down to every combination of apps and tech and device. so enough to give teachers and centres, to give them confidence and, you know,
Yeah.
and to trust their professionalism in
Yeah.
in dealing with this. And somebody's already made a suggestion, and I remember Paul saying, I think it must have been about a year ago now, Paul, that he's aware of all the good work that's happening out there in local authorities and in certain schools. So if we can somehow harness that, we will use Paul's expertise to work out how best to do that. But we're very, very keen to find a solution.
Well, exactly, and so that's really, I suppose that's where we're at now, which is potentially really exciting. Although I think that we shouldn't underestimate the challenges of doing it, because technically, I'm pretty certain it's possible to do. But as Annette was saying, the technical situation is so different across the country, that allowing it or permitting it to happen in principle doesn't make it happen.
No.
And so we know, you know, in some, like in one local authority, I think they've got Chromebooks for some learners, and I think the Google voice typing tool is just switched off for reasons unknown. In another local authority I was in yesterday, the Dictate tool, doesn't exist on their version of Word because it's Word 2016. And the Dictate tool will come on to this, you know, in a minute, I suppose. And the Dictate tool that's built into Windows itself, where you hold down the Windows key and press H, it isn't switched on either. And that's before we get anywhere near talking about how you can give access to the internet for those things to work, but prevent access to everything else.
Yeah.
But I think we need to work with practitioners and learners and support for learning staff, and particularly technical colleagues in local authorities, because it is also different. But I think this is just the first step, isn't it? So
absolutely.
If we have and so
a couple of comments in the chat panel there. So schools are obviously trying their own things to see to find solutions. So Nasir just talking about an app called Take a Test, which locks down the internet but allows accessibility tools, but not accessible through Glow. So that's one issue. Ali Smith's talking about a system, exam.net. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about, where you're actually you're locked into, so you're still being able to use accessibility tools, but you don't have full access to the internet. So there are obviously things out there that people are trying at the moment. Kerry goes on to talk about just the main issue with, you know, the using of Chromebooks, which are obviously online, and then, you know, they're using them every day, but then when they come to doing an exam or assessment, they're having to move to standalone Windows devices, and they're not used to that. So again, it's not their everyday way of working. So what could be possible on a Chromebook?
Yep.
So I guess at this point, then one question that we might put to people is if anyone's interested, I don't know what Annette, you and your colleagues are thinking of when it comes to doing this investigation about how online dictation tools can be used, but I'm assuming that it will involve working with.
I think you will be very heavily involved, Paul. Right. We were at least going. We are talking about future work, but we haven't had a chance to have a meeting yet. But no, it's something we would want to, and we don't have the technical expertise.
Yeah. Well, neither do I.
So, but you know how to find it. Is that?
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I guess if you know, if you, the people that are attending this, if you're interested in being involved with this investigation, looking at online dictation tools, then please either make that known in the chat, or email us or get in touch one way or another, because this is practical. We've got to find a solution to it, I think.
Absolutely. Paul, can I ask, and this is me just showing my complete ignorance. Are there other accessibility tools that are similar in that they're locked into being online or locked into devices? Or is it just the dictation?
It's a complicated answer.
Okay, let's not go there.
Some are. So, and I can't really remember off the top of my head.
No, it's
in
okay.
Google Docs on a Chromebook, I think if you disconnect yourself from the internet, the spell checker stops working. Is that right? I can't remember.
No, that's.
But there are some. If you ask this question, which online tools do people need? Then
Yes.
Immersive Reader will be something that folk use a lot.
Great.
But
right.
But Immersive Reader doesn't work with the SQA digital papers.
Aye.
So to some
Yes.
extent,
Yeah.
it really depends very much. Also, it depends on which device you're talking about. Chromebooks tend to use more tools that are online, I think.
I'm with you.
So it's just not an easy answer to. But
No,
online dictation is the main one.
Is the main one. That's great to know. Yep.
Look at all these people that are interested.
I know, it's just brilliant.
I'm noting all their names, so we'll have a nice list by the end of it.
That's why we're recording it. I see David Reed is asking, what dictation solutions do currently work with SQA? So would it be helpful if I just had a quick summary of dictation tools?
Yep.
Righty-ho. Do that. This is a very short presentation. So we'll just look at each of them in turn. On Windows, the options pretty much are Dictate, which is part of Word 365. So that's both the app or the program that you would install, that you might have installed on your PC, and also the online version of Word. And it uses the internet. If you don't have an internet connection, it doesn't work. And you would mainly use it to dictate into Word, or I guess OneNote, but in the examination context for dictating into Word, for typing up your or dictating your essays. Then we've got Windows Dictate. Now this is built into the Windows itself. It's not part of Office, and you can use Dictate to dictate into anything, and you can also use it to dictate into the SQA digital question papers. To find out if it works, you would click on any text field and press the Windows key and hold down H. And if Dictate's working for you, you can then dictate. However, as I say, we found that in some local authorities, it doesn't seem to be there. And I don't know why that is. We've asked, but we've yet to find out. It works online. If you don't have internet, it doesn't work. And lastly, we've got Dragon. So Dragon, naturally speaking, as used to be. And it's still available, still very, very good. It's still, got many features that make it a better tool than Dictate or Windows Dictate. But it does cost you quite a lot of money. Whereas the online Windows dictation tools are both free. And of course, SQA have got guidance on using Dragon on the website. But we don't have guidance yet on using Windows Dictate. So the links there are, I think Shirley might pop them in the chat. Be really interested to see what people think of using Dictate. Even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it wasn't that great. It's much better now though, and it seems to cope much more effectively with Scottish accents. Or that's what we think anyway. And then on iPads, we have two options. Mainly, we've got Siri, which has been around for yonks, it needs the internet. And then more recently, we've got voice control. And with voice control, you can download the voice control software facility to the iPad, so you don't need to be having internet access. And voice control also gives you some tools. It's particularly helpful for students who might have a physical challenge with accessing the iPad, because you can use voice control to control it, hence the name. And then on Chrome, again, it's a bit like Microsoft. We've got voice typing that's built into Google Docs itself, the word processor, and we've also got dictation that's built into the Chrome device itself. So provided you can, if you've got anything that you can type into on a Chromebook, you can use Chrome dictation to dictate into as well. So that's really them. Oh, and the Chrome options are all online. They don't work if you're not connected to the internet. And then, as discussed, we have SQA have guidance on using Dragon in exams, but there isn't yet guidance on using online dictation, because we haven't found a way to do it and make it secure as yet. But these are some questions which I would like to pose. I think there are many questions that we need to talk about, but for me, these are some of the ones that we might want to think about. So the first one is dictation accurate enough for examinations? You know, the examination is different from using dictation in class. You know, in class, you might have plenty of time to dictate a bit of work, and if it's not accurate, maybe we're not too bothered, because you know we can fix it. The teacher, you know, whereas in an examination, once it's done, it's done. So I suspect that accuracy is more important in an examination context. Is it reliable enough, given that we're talking about something that works over the internet? So that's a bit of an issue. If the internet falls down, what happens? And then the technical side of it, how can we access the online dictation while restricting access to the wider internet so that candidates can't Google the answers? Another question that came up this year was, can you train the systems to recognize specific vocabulary? So there was a teacher, we had a great long conversation about using an iPad to dictate in, I think it was biology or chemistry. And we could not get the wretched thing to reliably respond to, you know, some particular terms for chemistry, I think it was. And there's no way, we couldn't find a way to train it to make it reliable either, to make it accurate. And then if we're going to have a lot of learners using this technology, they're going to talk into their devices, there may be implications for accommodation and invigilation if it's done, you know, on a big way. And then a big one for me is, how do you handle recognition errors? So, you know, this stuff will make mistakes, and so, you know, how do you fix those mistakes before you press save or print? So there's, you know, if a learner has the ability to identify any recognition errors and then fix them themselves, that's great. But of course, you know, sometimes we're talking about learners that have got some challenges when it comes to editing text or reading the dictation that they've done. So how do we fix those mistakes? And then the kind of final question is, which learners would be and should be able to use dictation given all the above? So I think, you know, as Annette was saying, this is changing the policy to permit the use of online dictation is a first step, but there's quite a lot of technical and you know, questions about what's appropriate for additional support needs. So I've not been watching the chat, but have we got any comments or other questions? Maybe people
there are a few comments in there, and yeah. So just talking about the the logistics of it, and needing having extra space, everyone talking, so everyone's going to need a separate space. And just questions about the invigilators as well. One that's slightly not directly about speech recognition, but from Kerry Sinclair is asking, is SQA developing systems for the online delivery of exams, a platform similar to that used by the SNSA, for example?
Yes, well, I'm not sure where they are, because it's a whole other department in SQA, but for it's a terrible phrase, but for the generality of candidates, for all candidates, and depending on the Hayward review, we will absolutely need to have things in place as assessment changes and paper-based assessments are no longer viable or sensible. I suppose the thing that I wanted to ask at this point is, the candidates who use dictation, would they still be candidates? Like, I remember when Shirley first did the speech recognition pilot, so we were looking at candidates, you know, who were severely dyslexic, and I can't remember who else they're, but I wouldn't imagine in a cohort of candidates in a centre it would be a huge amount of people, or is there something I'm not getting?
I would imagine it depends on how well it works, you know. But I mean, the Talking in Exams project that we did, which was using Dragon, it's worth a read. But there's no doubt, I think, that you know, using dictation in an exam situation has got additional considerations to, you know, using it in class. Surely
sorry.
But yes, so then you've got the situation which, and Miss Marsh has commented this, in that she says we've not encouraged dictation much as we cannot find a solution for exams that was accurate enough. And at present our pupils don't have individual IT. So there's a scenario where, you know, these are people who would be able to get a better reflection of their cognitive ability if they were able to use speech recognition, but because they know it's going to be not possible in an exam situation, then they're probably not using it on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, that's a shame.
Paul, is that the level of detail we would need to get down to about accuracy, or do you think that would be something that guidance could help with? You know, I'm thinking of, I think the success of Dragon, wasn't it, was that you had seen a huge improvement in the accuracy of the text.
I don't know. I mean, the modern online dictation systems are getting better and better all the time, because you know, because they are. That's one of the advantages of them working online. And for some learners, the accuracy is fantastic. For other learners, it's not. So I can't see a situation where, you know, we could reasonably make a judgment. I think it's just, you know, it is part of what's being used in schools, as we can tell from, you know, the chat.
Absolutely.
Pauline's there. I'm finding there's an increase in the number of pupils coming to us in S1 who have successfully used dictation in primary, and that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
And there's, you know, the report that I just sent last month or the month before.
Yes.
Has just got examples of that. People are saying, yep, this seems to work. But I'm, you know, does it work well enough for an exam? I don't know. But I don't think we could, you know, it's centres, staff, learners who will be answering that question. You know, because if, you know, if it is the normal way of working, then then it's presumably gets used regularly in class, and students should have a good idea of whether they'd be comfortable using it. But if they don't, we use Scribe instead, or some other method of support. So I think it's just another option.
Yes.
That should definitely be investigated, but not prescribed in any way at all.
That makes sense.
So, has anyone got any other chat or comments about the online dictation? Do any LAs have a successful strategy for these offline dictation tools currently with SQA exams? Not to my knowledge, David. Offline anyway. I think it's quite unusual. I remember maybe 2018 asking for contacts. When colleagues make a request for an assessment arrangement, there's an option in the other to be specific about something that you might be asking for. So I do remember speaking to a small number of teachers who had put in Dragon as part of that, but it was a very small number. So I don't believe that any local authorities have looked at this in a widespread way. And David's asking, human scribes and readers are still the default. Well, not from the data that we saw earlier. I mean, it just, people using a word processor is far more common. But did we have 15,000 requests for use of a word processor compared with 5,000 for requests for a scribe? So I think it obviously depends on the needs of the learner. And I don't believe for a minute that online computer dictation will ever be as practical or reliable as a human scribe. When we're talking about the current, well, actually it might do, eh? The way that computers are improving and artificial intelligence, it's quite likely that we will get fantastic dictation quite rapidly. But a scribe brings much more flexibility to the whole affair. A scribe doesn't generally make too many mistakes, unlike online dictation. Yeah, so that's a really good comment from Kerry at Melbourne. Kerry, and this is, I think this is because with the modern versions of Word, if you can't turn off the spell, if you turn off the spell check, it turns off thesaurus as well. So yeah. And so that means that if you want spell check, you can't turn off the thesaurus. Is that correct? Yeah.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. What do we do about that?
And it's the same kind of thing with Chromebooks. Yeah. Well, it's now 4:45, and the last part of this discussion, and it is a discussion, we deliberately did not bill this as a training session. If we want professional learning, then we've got other opportunities for that. It's really just to, I suppose, well, first of all, for Annette to tell us that online dictation and the use of the internet is now possible, provided it's secure, and then to ask ourselves what we want to do next.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is your opportunity to, what do we need to do collectively That's Call Scotland and SQA, local authorities, technical teams. Yes, Shirley's saying, feel free to put your mic on and ask your questions. And this is it. And I'm just acutely aware that prelim season starts in some schools very soon. And then after that, it's a rapid sprint. You know, before you know where we are, we'll be in April. So anything that we're going to do has got to be done right now. So suggestions, please. What should we be collectively doing to improve the situation? Don't be shy.
I suppose my thoughts might be that if you are using speech to text in an exam and you need an individual invigilator, then you're almost in a similar position to having a scribe. But then I suppose if you're with a scribe, do you need an individual invigilator as well? So would it be one member of staff with online dictation and potentially 2 members of staff with a human scribe? We don't use human scribes, and we haven't done for years. But I'm sort of thinking we probably should go back to using them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know other folk. I guess if you're using a scribe, then you must have separate accommodation and therefore a separate invigilator.
Yes, because you wouldn't want to disturb any other candidate. I think there's something about the invigilator is there to ensure the conduct of the exam, so they wouldn't be watching the screen. They're not looking to catch people out. So we have to be secure in the assessment arrangements that are in place, that they work effectively and well for the candidate, and we've restricted, but it's not the invigilator's job to scrutinise the assessment arrangements itself, even if it's on screen, or, you know, it's like we have invigilators in exams with deaf learners, but who don't speak BSL. So they're not there about the content, they're there about the conduct of the exam, if that makes sense.
I'm thinking just from the chat there, then the thing that comes to my mind is, you know, if some schools aren't using any scribes at all, or very few, then obviously there may be scope for just using, you know, a device or a keyboard, and I guess that maybe meets the needs of most learners. But a relatively small number might require online dictation or a scribe.
Mm-hmm. The issues you were talking about, Paul, in biology, so, you know, the idea of technical language, and that's part of the thing in most subjects I think we would be assessing. But we would know, teachers would know, wouldn't they, whether that was an issue for their particular device, online dictation thing. Do some of these build up, the more you use them? Do they build up a picture of language, of words that a particular candidate would use?
We believe so.
Fantastic.
Well, but that we just believe so. They seem to get better the more often you use them.
Great, right, yes.
Other, you know, people that are involved with using them could maybe say if that's true or not. Just one thing to say, it's not just the online dictation that we're asking for you to tell us what needs to be thought about. It's the use of Chromebooks and iPads now that we are permitted to use the internet. So, there are two aspects of it, but we know that there's a lot of learners that are being provided with Chromebooks in particular, I think. But last term, as far as we can understand it, most of the learners who use technology in exams used a Windows laptop or a Windows desktop. Now, actually, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. Despite the normal way of working, it might be perfectly reasonable for learners to just use a slightly different device. So I'd be interested in your comments on that, because I would be assuming that you want to use the same device in the examination that you're using in the class, and that anything that was different might be awkward. But that's not necessarily the case. And so we should ask ourselves, even if you're using an iPad or a Chromebook in the class, is it reasonable to expect staff and learners to learn the skills to use digital question papers or Microsoft Word or whatever it is on a Windows PC? I mean, is that fair or not? What do you think?
We find some challenges getting learners to move from Chromebook use to physical PCs. We tend to stick to using the PCs for purely kind of safety for us, I suppose. We get more glitches with the Wi-Fi in the building if we use laptops and Chromebooks. So we tend to find that using fixed labs where we've got PCs, it gives everyone the kind of security of knowing that the chances are they're going to work. There's not going to be any challenges printing the paper at the end of the exam and things like that. So that we don't have individual devices for learners in our school yet, but we use Chromebooks mainly in first to third year, but then we do tend to try and shift them into booking assessment access to a computing lab and things like that to try and practice using the actual technology they'll be using in the final exam, really. But it is a big jump for a lot, and we're actually seeing, I think, because of the past couple of years of online learning and a lot of Chromebooks being issued in our local authority, we're seeing a huge number of parents that are really challenging us on this and saying, well, my child's much more confident with a Chromebook. They know their way around it. They would like to use that tool as they go through the school. And we get that. We do understand that because that's what the child has learned to use and they're confident with that. But I think we need to keep up with things, and I don't think we're quite there yet. My other issue would be, sorry, I'm kind of taking over now, but my other issue would be around Invigilator confidence as well with technology. We find we're called on a lot to go into the exams to sort out different kind of quirks and things like that, which is fine, but it does still then require, staff members to be on call and available and things like that to do that. A lot of our invigilators aren't very confident with technology. They're very, very good, don't get me wrong, but technology would not be their strong points. I think there would potentially be a training area for invigilators around this as well, and it would be good, thinking quite radically, if they were involved in the discussions about increasing the use of technology, because it's not, for us, we've got a high number of additional assessment arrangement candidates. And we always have had. We've got an ASN unit in our school, so we do traditionally have that number. But I think there's increasing numbers. Through COVID, we've seen a lot of mental health requests for separate accommodation, and digital technologies being increased as well. So I think there's more and more for some exams out of the exam hall than there are actually in the exam hall. And it's really around how to manage that and things like that.
Right, that's really good. And I see there's been, Ali Smith there is again mentioning exam.net, which is a secure product that could be potentially used. The only problem with exam.net when I last tested it was that you can't use accessibility tools like text to speech to read or access the SQA exam papers, which is a huge unfortunate thing. But for candidates who simply want to type up their assessments, then something like exam.net or DigiExams is another one would be worth looking at. And someone's saying about not having to print out. Mr. Beer. Yeah, and people have said that printing in some of the local authorities where you've got iPads and Chromebooks is a huge challenge. And that's one reason why devices aren't being used. And it's because, actually, people could maybe see why, but I'm told that you've maybe got one central printer somewhere, and so the security of printing to that printer, and then going to find it and work out which student has actually printed it from which iPad makes it almost impossible to do securely.
I'll certainly, there was some talk at some point about something. I think somebody called it a Dropbox, which is a is that a piece of software in its own right? Dropbox,
yeah,
it's
like OneDrive or Google Drive.
So yes, I shall go away and check with other colleagues and see if there's anything happening in that area.
Well, it's 4 minutes to 5, so I suppose if you do have time to fill in that wee survey form that Shirley shared the link with, then we're thinking that we'll carry on these conversations. So I guess we'll be having discussions with colleagues in SQA about where we go next with the online dictation. But the wider picture of just how you organise a Chromebook or an iPad, or indeed a Windows device, using online methods. So I'm just thinking, the simplest thing in the world, you just want to find a way to distribute your, digital question papers to everybody that's using a Chromebook in a secure way and prevent them using anything else. It's that kind of level of simplicity, I think, that we're talking about. And it's a separate issue from online dictation, because the majority of candidates just want to type up their assessments. So that seems to me, that's a big hit if we can do something about that for Chromebooks and iPads, and address the spell checking security as well. That's the second part.
That would be, yep.
Then these are the things that would make life an awful lot easier for a large number of students and staff when it comes to organising the exams. So I don't have anything practical or to say, but I think we'll if it's okay, we'll keep having these meetings, and the people that volunteered to be involved will definitely get in touch and see if we can make some moves forward. So is that fair enough, folks? Has anyone got any last comments or questions?
There was a comment from Kerry in the chat about SQA Connect. Could it be further utilised? You won't be surprised, Kerry, that my answer is I don't know, but I do know who to ask. So I will certainly go back and do some digging, find out if that's a possibility.
And just before we finish, sorry. Carry on, Shirley.
I've just collated some of the questions there, just in terms of our next step forward. So I've put them down, sort of typed them out there, just so. But Brilliant. We'll go back to the chat and I'll pull them all together, and then hopefully in the survey people will have put extra comments in there, and we can get a way forward with this. I know it's kind of hard sometimes when you're thinking, and probably when you've come away from the session, you'll think of something else there. So we'll but this has been a great starting point. So thank you very much to both of you for, and everyone that's joined in today to be part of the conversation, because it's really so important that we have practitioners on board, and we only know a little part of it, and you're doing it on the day-to-day with the learners. So, but thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, thanks
Great.
everybody.
Yes, thank you for all your time.
Right, we'll
Yep.
close the meeting now and
Great.
hope to be in touch.
Smashing.